Let me ask you something. What if I told you that just owning move, just one intentional shift, could completely change how the world sees you? No, I'm not talking about some trick. I'm not talking about pretending to be something you're not. I'm talking about tapping into who you really are and letting that version of you walk into the room. Because here's the truth. People don't see you for who you are. They see you for how you carry yourself. You could be brilliant. You could be kind, hardworking, talented. But if your energy says, I'm unsure, if your voice says, I'll accept less, they will treat you accordingly. The real world doesn't reward who deserves the most. It rewards who demands respect without raising their voice. So if you've ever wondered why you get overlooked, why people interrupt you, ignore your ideas, cross your boundaries like they were never even there, it's not because they're blind. It's because you haven't given them a reason to see you differently. But here's the game changer. You only need to do this once. One shift in how you walk, one line drawn in the sand, one moment of powerful silence, and everything begins to move. So stay with me, because by the end of this, you're going to learn how to carry yourself in a way that makes people sit up straight when you speak. You're going to walk away with the fire, the clarity, and the steps to say, this is who I am. You will treat me accordingly. Now let's break it all down. The way you carry yourself sets the tone for how the world engages with you. You don't have to say a word. Before you even open your mouth, people are already forming opinions about you. They're watching how you walk, how you sit, how you make eye contact, and how you handle silence. You could have the right qualifications, a brilliant mind, and a good heart, but if your body language screams insecurity, hesitation, or desperation, people pick up on that. And whether you realize it or not, they start treating you according to that silent signal you're sending out. But here's the truth. Confidence is not about arrogance. It's not about having all the answers or being the loudest person in the room. Real confidence is quiet. It's grounded. It's the way you stand when nobody's watching. It's the way you look someone in the eye without flinching. It's the calm energy you carry when you know who you are and don't need to prove it to anybody. You see, the world responds to signals, not intentions. You could be full of potential, but if you walk around with your shoulders slumped, your head down, and your voice barely above a whisper, people won't see your power. They won't feel your value, because power isn't just something you say you have. It's something you wear like a second skin, and that begins with posture, tone, and presence. Imagine walking into a room where no one knows you. You don't speak right away. You take your time. You walk with purpose, not rushing, not dragging. You make eye contact, not to intimidate, but to connect. You sit down and say less than usual, but every word you do say has weight. You don't explain every little thing. You don't try to impress. You just are. People feel that. They notice it. Why? Because presence is rare. Most people either shrink or perform. But when you do neither, when you show up in your full energy, without trying to dominate or disappear, people start leaning in. They start paying attention. And here's the crazy part. You don't even need to do it consistently at first. Just try it once. Just once. Walk into your workplace, your meeting, that family gathering, or even the grocery store, and carry yourself like you're meant to be there. Shoulders back, chest open, steady eyes. Say less. Listen more. Don't fidget. Don't rush. Move like someone who knows they belong. That one shift alone will change the atmosphere around you. People will speak to you differently. They'll regard you with a little more curiosity, a little more respect, and maybe even a little more caution. Because now they're trying to figure out who you are. You don't have to be loud to be powerful. Some of the most powerful people speak softly and move slowly. But every step, every gesture carries authority. You can't fake that, but you can build it, you can develop it, and it starts with becoming intentional about your posture, your tone, and your presence. You train yourself to sit up straight even when no one is looking. You practice speaking clearly, calmly, and with control, even in everyday conversations. You become aware of your habits. Do you laugh nervously? Do you touch your face when you speak? Do you fill silence with pointless words because you're afraid of stillness? Once you catch those things, you begin to eliminate them. And in their place, you build stillness, control, and strength. This is not about becoming someone else. This is about becoming fully you. The version of you that doesn't shrink, doesn't chase, and doesn't apologize for existing. The version of you that understands that confidence isn't something you wear on your best days. It's something you embody even when you're uncertain, even when you're afraid. Because when you shift how you carry yourself, people start to mirror that shift back to you. They speak more respectfully. They hesitate before interrupting. They listen longer. They value your time. Not because you demanded it with words, but because you commanded it with your presence. Do this once. Just once. Walk through your day with deliberate presence and silent confidence. And then just watch. Watch how people look at you differently. Watch how they adjust their tone, their posture, even their words. Because the world is always watching, always responding. And when you step into your full presence, you don't just change how people treat you. You change how they remember you. There comes a moment in your life when you realize that peace is more valuable than approval. That's the moment when everything starts to shift. The day you decide to set boundaries, real ones, clear ones, unapologetic ones, is the day people begin to see you differently. Not because you've suddenly become unkind or distant, but because you finally understood your worth. Boundaries are not walls, they are doors. Doors that you choose to open or close based on the energy, respect, and intentions that someone brings into your space. People treat you based on what you allow. If you constantly say yes when you mean no, if you stretch yourself thin trying to keep everyone comfortable while you suffer in silence, people get used to that version of you. They start to believe that your time is always available, that your energy is endless, that your kindness is infinite. But here's the truth. When you don't set boundaries, you end up living in quiet resentment. You smile on the outside, but inside, you feel exhausted, frustrated, invisible. And you know what makes it worse? People don't even realize they're crossing a line because you never showed them where the line was. The moment you set a boundary, things change. That first time you say, "I can't do that right now," without over-explaining. That first time you say, "I don't appreciate being spoken to that way," without raising your voice. That first time you cancel a commitment that no longer serves your growth, or walk away from a conversation that drains you, something shifts, not just in them, but in you. You start to reclaim the parts of yourself that you gave away too easily. You begin to feel stronger, lighter, more in control. And people, they notice. They may not say it out loud, but they feel the difference. Some will resist. Some won't like the new you. They'll call you difficult. They'll say you've changed. And they're right. You have. You've stopped shrinking to fit into places you've outgrown. You've stopped sacrificing your well-being for the comfort of others. You've stopped being available for every little emergency that isn't yours to fix. And that makes people uncomfortable. But their discomfort is not your responsibility. Your responsibility is to protect your peace. Because once you lose that, everything else falls apart. When you start setting boundaries, you're going to see relationships shift. Some will fade. Some will end. But the ones that remain, those are the ones built on mutual respect. Those are the ones where people don't just take, but they give. They check in, they ask instead of assume. They understand that your time and energy are valuable. That you are not a resource to be consumed, but a person to be appreciated. And don't think for a second that boundaries are just about others. They're also about you. You need to set boundaries with your own mind, with your thoughts, with your habits. You need to tell yourself, "I won't keep entertaining this negative self-talk." You need to say, "I won't keep letting guilt run my life." That's a boundary too. Because if you don't respect your own internal limits, no one else will. It starts with you. Every time you allow peace to guide your decisions instead of fear or guilt, you reinforce the message that you are not to be mistreated, not even by your own thoughts. So when people ask what changed, tell them this: you stopped apologizing for protecting your energy. You stopped explaining your worth. You stopped overextending yourself just to be seen. And once you made that decision, the world adjusted. People started speaking with more care. They started asking instead of demanding. And if they didn't, they slowly disappeared. And that was okay too. Because peace over chaos is a trade you'll make every time once you understand what it feels like to stand tall inside your own boundaries. You only have to do it once to start the shift. One moment of clarity, One decision to say, this is what I allow. This is what I won't. And then watch. Watch how the energy changes around you. Watch how the wrong people fade and the right ones rise. Because when you set a boundary, you're not pushing people away. You're drawing a line that says, if you want access to me, respect is the price of admission. And that is the beginning of a whole new chapter in your life. There's something powerful about the word no. It's short, it's sharp, and when used correctly, it's one of the most liberating things you can ever say. But for most people, that tiny word is the hardest one to get out. We've been conditioned to be agreeable. We've been trained to be available, to say yes just to keep the peace, to avoid being labeled as selfish, rude, or difficult. And so, we say yes when we want to say no. We agree to things that drain us. We commit to things that don't align with who we are. All because we're afraid of what might happen if we simply speak the truth and say, no, I can't do that. But the moment you say, no, without guilt is the moment your entire life begins to change. It's the moment people start to see you not as someone who can be used, but someone who has clarity, direction, and purpose. That first no is a declaration. It tells the world that your time is valuable. It says your energy is sacred. It announces that you are no longer available for things that don't feed your soul or move your life forward. And the beauty of it is that you don't need to justify it. You don't owe anyone an essay explaining why your boundaries matter. No is a full sentence. Say it. Own it, let it stand. What people often don't realize is that when you say no to something, you're actually saying yes to something else. Your peace, your focus, your family, your purpose, your rest, your healing. Every no you speak without guilt clears space in your life for what actually matters. It filters out distractions and obligations that were never yours to begin with. It protects you from burnout, resentment, and emotional exhaustion. And while it may feel uncomfortable at first, that discomfort is temporary. The clarity that comes afterward, that's permanent. Of course, the first time you say it, you might feel the tremble in your voice. You might second-guess yourself. You might even feel the pull to call back and take it all back. But don't. Sit in it. Stand in it. Feel the power that comes from choosing yourself without shame. Because once people hear you say, no, and they see that you didn't crumble, they'll begin to adjust. They'll think twice before assuming you'll always say yes. They'll approach you with more respect, more caution, more consideration. Not because you've become cold or distant, but because you've become cleared. You don't have to be rude. You don't have to raise your voice. You just have to stand firm. You don't need to explain why you're unavailable for that extra project, that last-minute favor, that emotionally draining conversation. You simply say, I can't do that, and let the silence do the rest. Because when you stop trying to cushion your no with soft excuses, you teach people that your boundaries are not open to negotiation. Some people will take it personally. That's not your fault. That's a reflection of how they've benefited from your inability to say no in the past. They're not upset that you're being unfair. They're upset that they can no longer take advantage of your silence. But you're not here to be everyone's savior. You're not here to meet everyone's expectations at the cost of your sanity. You're here to live a life that's aligned, focused, and full of peace. And that can only happen when you start saying no to what no longer fits. The truth is, the people who truly care about you will understand. They'll honor your boundaries. They won't demand access to every part of you just because they've had it before. They'll see your no, not as rejection, but as growth. And those who don't, let them go. Let them drift. Because if someone's love or respect depends on you constantly saying yes, then it was never love or respect to begin with. It was control wrapped in convenience. Say it once. Say it strong. No. Say it to the meetings you don't need to attend. Say it to the invitations that don't align with your energy. Say it to the guilt that creeps up and tells you you're being selfish. Say it to the fear that tells you people will leave. Say it with your head held high and your heart grounded in truth. And then watch. Watch how the world around you starts to shift. Watch how your peace expands. Watch how people begin to value your yes more. Because now they know you mean it. Say no without guilt and you'll never go back to who you were before. There's a moment when you stop waiting for people to clap for you and start clapping for yourself. That moment is where real transformation begins. Because when you stop relying on external validation to feel worthy, you reclaim your power. Most people don't realize how much of their lives they've given away in the form of silent expectations. Hoping someone will notice their effort, hoping someone will acknowledge their growth, hoping someone will finally say, "You did well." But what happens when that applause never comes? What happens when the people you thought would cheer for you are silent or even resentful? Do you stop? Do you shrink? Or do you learn to be your own source of encouragement? There is something magnetic about a person who walks into a room with quiet confidence, someone who doesn't need praise to feel important. That kind of person radiates strength, and it's not because they think they're better than anyone. It's because they've stopped begging for recognition. They've stopped tying their self-worth to the opinions of others. And when you make that shift, people notice. They may not say it out loud, but they feel it. Your energy changes. Your presence becomes heavier. You're not chasing attention anymore. You are attention. You're not waiting for permission to feel proud. You've given it to yourself. Clapping for yourself means celebrating your growth even when nobody else sees it. It means recognizing how far you've come, even if the progress is quiet and invisible to the outside world. It means giving yourself credit for the healing you've done, the discipline you've built, the boundaries you've enforced, and the habits you've changed. And here's the thing, when you learn to do that, you become unstoppable. Because your motivation is no longer fragile. It's not built on someone else's approval. It's rooted in self-respect. This doesn't mean you never need people. It doesn't mean you isolate yourself or walk around with arrogance. It means you stop outsourcing your joy. It means you understand that applause is nice, but it's not fuel. Your fuel comes from knowing that you're showing up every day for your purpose, even when nobody's watching. It comes from being proud of the way you handled that conflict without losing your temper. It comes from finishing that goal you set, even if nobody noticed. It comes from waking up every morning and deciding to try again. Too many people wait for others to crown them before they believe they're worthy. But the truth is, you don't need a crown when you walk like royalty. You don't need validation when you live with intention. And when you finally embrace that, you become dangerous in the best way. Because now you're not moved by gossip. You're not swayed by criticism. You're not paralyzed by silence. You've created a system inside yourself that keeps you going regardless of who claps. That kind of energy shifts the room. People start to notice that you don't flinch when you're ignored. You don't fall apart when you're misunderstood. You're not desperate to be liked. And that's exactly why people start paying attention. It's ironic, but when you stop needing approval, that's when respect starts to show up. Not because you demanded it, but because you embodied it. People treat you differently when they see you're not easily broken. When they realize you won't shrink for compliments. When they feel that your peace isn't for sale. So go ahead, clap for yourself, loudly. Celebrate every step, even the small ones. Be proud of the days you didn't give up. Be proud of the hours you spent working behind the scenes. Be proud of how you've held yourself together through the storms. You earned it. And when you carry that kind of self-respect, it teaches others how to treat you. They learn that you're not someone who waits around to be chosen. You've already chosen yourself. And that, more than anything, will change the way the world sees you. Not because you shouted it, but because you lived it. There is a certain shift that happens when you stop over-explaining yourself to people. It's the moment you realize that your life, your decisions, your healing, and your boundaries don't need to be justified for them to be real. Too many people spend too much time trying to convince others to understand their choices. They explain why they're stepping back, why they're walking away, why they've changed direction. They spill their hearts in hopes of receiving understanding, hoping that if they say the right thing, others will finally accept what they've chosen. But here's the truth. You don't owe anyone an explanation for how you choose to protect your peace. When you stop over-explaining, you step into a new level of maturity and clarity. You begin to move differently. You understand that not everyone deserves access to your reasoning, especially those who have already decided not to respect it. The people who care for you, really care, won't need long-winded speeches to understand your growth. They'll feel it. They'll respect your silence. They'll trust your intent. But those who constantly question, challenge, or guilt trip your boundaries. You don't need to convince them, because convincing someone who's committed to misunderstanding you is a battle that only leads to exhaustion. Think about how much energy you've lost trying to justify yourself. Think about how many times you've replayed conversations in your head, wondering if you should have said more, or said it differently, or said it nicer. And what did it really change? Most of the time, nothing. Because some people don't want to understand. They want control. They want access. And when they feel that access slipping away, they demand explanations not to understand, but to manipulate. That's why you need to draw the line. When you no longer feel the need to explain yourself to everyone, your presence starts to speak for itself. People begin to feel your boundaries without you having to announce them. You start to live with a quiet strength. You walk into rooms and you're no longer asking for space. You are the space. You stop watering yourself down just to be digestible. You stop apologizing for outgrowing the versions of yourself that made other people comfortable. You simply live, and in that living, you teach others how to handle you, with respect, with care, or not at all. And yes, some people will call you distant. Some will say you've changed. Some will say you're cold. But the truth is, you've just stopped making yourself small to fit into places you've outgrown. You've stopped sacrificing your well-being to keep relationships alive that were never meant to survive your healing. You've stopped over-sharing with people who use your vulnerability as ammunition. And you've learned that silence can be stronger than any speech you could give. Not because you don't have anything to say, but because not everyone deserves to hear it. This doesn't make you arrogant. It makes you wise. It means you've learned that your decisions don't require a roundtable discussion. You don't need votes to validate your direction. You don't need approval to follow your intuition. You are allowed to grow. You are allowed to evolve. And you are allowed to do so without sending out a newsletter explaining why. Start showing up without over-explaining why you're different. Let your growth be the proof. Let your energy do the talking. When you say no, let it stand. When you leave a room, let the silence speak. When you move on, let your peace answer every question they didn't ask with good intentions. Because at the end of the day, real confidence is quiet. It doesn't beg to be understood. It simply is. And when you start operating from that place of quiet confidence, of self-trust, of unapologetic boundaries, people treat you differently. They listen more. They assume less. They watch their words and reconsider their tone. Because now, you're not someone who bends just to make others feel comfortable. You're someone who moves with purpose. And that kind of presence doesn't need to explain itself. It commands respect without raising its voice. There's something transformative that happens when you walk into a room and no longer need to prove anything to anyone. When you've done the work, internally, emotionally, spiritually, you begin to realize that you are enough just as you are. You're not seeking validation. You're not chasing approval. You're not performing for acceptance. You show up grounded, steady, and whole. And when you carry that kind of presence, the world begins to respond to you differently. Because people can feel it when you've made peace with yourself. They can sense it when you're no longer operating from a place of insecurity or desperation. And suddenly, the way they treat you starts to shift, not because you asked them to, but because your energy demanded it. You see, the most powerful room you'll ever enter is the one where you no longer feel the urge to shrink. You're not trying to be the loudest. You're not fighting to be seen. You're not grasping for someone to acknowledge you. You walk in with a calm certainty, a quiet strength. And that's what gets noticed. That's what commands respect. Because you're not performing. You're just being. You're not competing. You're just showing up in your truth. And that truth is magnetic. When you stop needing to prove yourself, you start to reclaim all the pieces of you that you gave away trying to be liked. You no longer have to convince people that you're worthy. You know you are. And it's not an arrogant knowing, it's a humble one. It's rooted in the fact that you've been through the fire and you didn't let it break you. You faced the storms and you didn't drown. You've stood alone and you didn't collapse. You don't need to talk about it. You don't need to announce it. It's in your posture, in your silence, in the way you carry yourself. And people feel it. People are drawn to those who are secure in themselves, not because they boast or brag, but because they don't. Their peace is loud. Their authenticity is unmistakable. They don't enter rooms to prove their value. They are the value. And ironically, the less you seek approval, the more you receive it. Because people are wired to respond to realness. They are drawn to certainty. They may not always like it, but they respect it. And let's be real, trying to prove yourself is exhausting. It's a never-ending chase. No matter how much you do, it's never enough for someone who's determined not to see your worth. You change yourself, shrink yourself, bend yourself, and still, they want more. But when you stop playing that game, you reclaim your power. You stop running toward people and start attracting what's meant for you. You realize that the right rooms don't require you to audition. They recognize your presence and make space. This shift doesn't mean you stop growing. It doesn't mean you stop learning. It just means your growth is no longer driven by insecurity. It's driven by purpose. You improve yourself because you love yourself, not because you're trying to become someone else's idea of worthy. And that kind of growth is sustainable. That kind of growth is real. It takes courage to walk into a room and not perform. It takes self-awareness to be okay with not being everyone's favorite. It takes maturity to stand tall without shouting, to speak with impact without speaking often. But once you reach that level, life begins to feel lighter. Your relationships become more genuine. Your circle becomes smaller but deeper. The respect you receive becomes more sincere, and the peace you carry, unshakable. So stop proving and start being. Be the one who doesn't flinch under silence. Be the one who doesn't need to be the center of attention to feel valuable. Be the one who walks into a room with quiet authority, whose presence says everything before you speak a single word. That kind of presence doesn't need explanation. It doesn't need applause. It just is. And when you embody that, the way people treat you will never be the same. Because now, they're dealing with someone who knows who they are. And that changes everything.